They called her a beast, a curse wrapped in red fur and amber fire, until she looked at me, trembling, asking why I hadn't turned away. Thanks for tuning in. Before we dive into today's story, consider subscribing. It's the best way to make sure you never miss the next adventure. On the fractured frontier of the Orion Rim, settlements clung to survival between trade routes and wilderness. Among them was Elisir, a mining colony half carved into stone canyons. It was here that a girl was whispered about in every tavern, her name twisted into slurs: fox beast, cursed, abomination. Few had seen her, fewer still dared to speak to her. Yet when I found her bloodied in the dust of the canyon road, I knew the stories were lies. The canyon winds howled, pulling grit across my visor as I adjusted the plasma torch on my hip. Elisir was home now, though home was generous. A mining outpost run by bickering guilds, its streets filled with weary workers and opportunists like me, freelancers, scrappers, those who made a living on salvage and repair. The stories about her had reached me long before I saw her. A beast woman with vulpine ears and a tail, born of genetic tampering, or so the rumors went. Don't look her in the eyes, one miner muttered at the cantina. They say she can curse you. Another swore she'd mauled a man to death with claws. Most dismissed her existence outright, chalking it up to drunken tales. I didn't believe them. Or maybe I didn't want to. The galaxy was full of engineered beings, consorts, soldiers, hybrids built for war and abandoned when peace treaties made them inconvenient. I'd seen too many discarded lives to take the miner's words at face value. That night I found her. The mob had cornered her outside the north gate, where canyon dust gathered in drifts. Torches glowed, the miners' voices sharp with fear and drink. I slipped into the shadows, drawn by the noise. And then I saw her. She was no beast. She was a girl, red fur streaked across her ears and tail, her frame trembling, eyes like molten amber catching the firelight. Blood smeared her cheek where someone had struck her. She held her arms close, not striking back, not even speaking. "Drive her out!" one shouted. "She's a curse on the mines!" Another bellowed. Her gaze flicked between them, wide with panic, until it landed on me. In that heartbeat I saw it, not malice, not the hunger of a beast. Just fear, raw and desperate. And I stepped forward. "That's enough," I said, voice carrying over the crowd. The miners turned, surprised. No one ever spoke for her. I moved through them, not fast, not slow, letting my hand rest near the torch on my belt. I wasn't here for a fight, but I'd give one if they forced it. She flinched as I approached, her breath coming in shallow gasps. I kept my hands open, palms forward. "You don't need to be afraid," I said quietly, only for her ears. The crowd jeered. "What, you siding with the beast? She'll rip your throat out in your sleep." I ignored them. My eyes stayed on hers. Slowly I offered her my hand. Her lips parted, trembling as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. And then, hesitantly, painfully, her fingers brushed mine. The mob roared, anger spitting from their throats, but I felt her hand tighten, clutching mine like a lifeline. And in that moment I knew the stories were wrong. She wasn't a curse. She wasn't a beast. She was someone who had been shunned so deeply that even kindness felt like salvation. "Come on," I whispered, guiding her past the torches, past the glares and spitting curses. "You're safe with me." We walked into the canyon night together, her hand trembling in mine, the miners' voices fading behind us. That was the night the galaxy changed. Not because of me, but because I chose not to turn away. We didn't speak much that first night. She followed me through the canyon paths, her bare feet silent on the grit while I led her toward my workshop at the edge of Elisir. Every so often, I'd glance back and see her eyes flick nervously to the shadows, ears twitching at every echo of the wind. The workshop wasn't much. A prefab shack patched with salvage, half buried against the canyon wall. Inside, it smelled of metal, oil, and the faint burn of plasma from my tools. I pushed open the door, letting the low amber lights flicker on, and stepped aside for her. She hesitated, staring at me like I might suddenly reveal the trap. Her tail curled tight against her legs, protective. "It's safe," I told her gently. "No one's going to come here without me knowing." For a moment, she just stood there, trembling. Then she stepped across the threshold, shoulders stiff, and I shut the door behind her. Her eyes darted everywhere: my cluttered workbench, the shelves of broken drones, the hammock strung in the corner. Finally, her gaze landed back on me. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "You don't have to talk," I said, setting my torch on the bench. "Not yet." That seemed to ease something in her. She slid to the floor by the wall, curling her knees up, her tail wrapped around her like a shield. I brought her a flask of water and some ration bars. She sniffed at them, suspicious at first, before hunger broke her hesitation. She ate like someone who hadn't had a steady meal in days. When she finished, she wiped at her mouth with the back of her hand, ears tilted back as if expecting me to scold her. Instead, I crouched down across from her. "What's your name?" I asked softly. She froze. Her lips parted, but she shook her head, fur brushing across her cheeks as if she couldn't bring herself to speak it aloud. "That's all right," I said after a moment. "You don't have to tell me. I'll wait." Her amber eyes flicked up to mine, wide and searching. And then, for the briefest second, I saw something crack through the fear. A flicker of gratitude. Days passed. She didn't leave the workshop, not even when I offered. I suspected she was afraid the miners would be waiting. I didn't push her. Instead, I kept working, scrapping old drones, repairing mining gear. And let her exist in the same space. Slowly, she began to trust. She'd watch me while I worked, her ears twitching whenever sparks flew from the torch. At first, she'd retreat into herself when I caught her staring. But gradually, she stopped looking away. One evening, I left a small trinket on the workbench, a brass gear polished until it gleamed, strung on a cord. A nothing gift, really, but something to say I saw her. The next morning, it was gone. And later, I noticed it hanging around her neck, hidden partly beneath her fur. I didn't mention it. It was on the fourth night she finally spoke. Her voice was a whisper, rasped from disuse. "Why?" I set down the tool I was holding, turning toward her. "Why what?" Her ears pinned back, her tail twitching nervously. "Why did you help?" The question cut through the silence heavier than any blade. She looked at me like she was bracing for cruelty, for the truth to finally come crashing down. I answered simply. "Because you needed it." Because no one deserves to be treated like that. Her eyes shimmered, her hands curling into fists against her knees. She shook her head. "They're right. I'm not like you. I'm not human." "No," I said, firm but calm. "You're not. And that's not a bad thing." She blinked at me, confusion flickering across her face like I'd spoken a language she'd never heard before. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Then what am I?" I held her gaze steady. "You're someone worth protecting." Her breath hitched, and she looked away, pressing her hand against the small brass gear at her neck. And though she didn't say it, I saw it in her trembling shoulders. My kindness was breaking through walls she thought would never fall. Trust came in small pieces. Not with declarations or promises, but with the quiet, ordinary things that made up life in Ellisor. I'd wake in the morning to find she tidied the workshop, sweeping the grit from the floor with her tail or stacking scrap into neater piles. Once, she even repaired a cracked drone casing with surprising delicacy, her claws steady as surgical tools. When I asked how she knew to do that, she only shrugged, ears flicking, but her eyes softened when I said, "Looks like I've got a partner in the shop." The word partner seemed to linger with her. Ellisor, meanwhile, noticed. Whispers followed me in the market when I went to trade for supplies. Some miners spat on the ground when I passed, muttering that I'd been tainted by the fox beast. Others just looked at me with pity, like I'd gone mad. One evening, a foreman cornered me outside the cantina. A heavy-set man with coal-blackened hands and a voice rough as gravel. "You're making a mistake," he growled. I adjusted the pack on my shoulder. Am I? She's dangerous. That thing's got blood on her hands. You want to lose your throat in your sleep, keep her under your roof. I met his glare evenly. Funny. I've lived with her days now, and all she's done is sweep floors and fix scrap. His lip curled. You're blind, boy. And blind men don't last long out here. I walked past him without another word. But I felt his eyes burning into my back, and I knew the settlement's patience was running thin. That night, she sensed it. She always did. Sitting cross-legged by the workbench, she glanced at me from beneath her lashes, tail twitching uneasily. They hate you now, she murmured. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. They've hated me before. Not the first time I've been the outsider. Her ears perked slightly, curious. You. But you're human. I smiled faintly. Being human doesn't mean much when people decide you don't belong. She looked down at her hands, fur brushing over her knuckles. Then why not send me away? You'd be safe. I pushed off the wall, stepping closer, my voice quiet but firm. Because safety's not worth living in if it means abandoning someone who needs you. Her eyes lifted to mine, uncertain, searching, almost disbelieving. Then she whispered, "No one's ever said that, not to me." She turned away quickly, but not before I saw the shimmer in her eyes. It was later, under the canyon stars, when I found her standing outside the workshop. She wore the brass gear still, fingers brushing it absently as she stared into the sky. I stepped beside her, folding my arms, letting the silence stretch. The twin moons bathed her fur in silver, her ears flicking at the night wind. "They call me a beast," she said at last, her voice quiet. "They think I was made wrong. I don't even know if I have a real name. The only ones I've ever heard were curses." My chest tightened. "Then we'll choose one," I said. She blinked, turning toward me. "Choose." I nodded. "A name that's yours. Not theirs. One that fits who you are, not what they fear." Her lips parted, trembling. She stared at me like I'd offered her a gift too heavy to lift. "But what if I don't know who I am?" "Then we'll figure it out. Together." The night air carried her shaky breath. Slowly she nodded, clutching the gear at her chest. And when she whispered, "Maybe call me Lyra," I smiled. "Lyra," I said softly, letting the name settle into the stars. "That's who you are." Her ears tilted forward, eyes shimmering in the moonlight. And for the first time since I'd met her, she smiled. A small, fragile thing, but real. Lyra. The name settled into my mind as easily as breath, like it had been waiting there for me to speak it aloud. She whispered it to herself sometimes when she thought I wasn't listening, testing the sound as though she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep it. And each time she did, her tail swayed just a little, betraying the tiniest flicker of joy. But joy didn't come without shadows. Life in Ellisor only grew harder. The miners didn't just whisper anymore. They stared openly, muttered curses when I passed, or knocked over tools I left in the market. Once, I returned to my stall to find my parts scattered into the dirt. A warning scrawled in chalk across the wall, "Beast Lover." Lyra saw it when I brought supplies home. Her ears flattened, her gaze darting to the floor. I expected her to retreat into silence, but instead she whispered, "You should let me go. They'll ruin you." I set the pack down harder than I meant to, making her flinch. "Lyra," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "I told you before, I won't." Her eyes lifted, a spark of defiance under the fear. "You don't understand. I've seen this before. Once they start marking you, it doesn't stop. Not until—" She trailed off, voice breaking. "Not until what?" I pressed. She shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. "Not until someone bleeds." I crossed the room, crouched in front of her, and took her trembling hands in mine. "Then let it be me before you." Her amber eyes burned into mine, searching, desperate to find a lie. But there was none. Slowly, her fingers tightened on mine, claws careful not to scratch. That night, she didn't curl against the wall to sleep. She slipped into the hammock with me, tentative at first, her tail brushing against my side like a question. I didn't move away. Instead, I shifted just enough to give her space, until I felt her weight lean into me. Her breath slowed against my chest, and for the first time since I'd met her, she slept without twitching awake at every sound. The days blurred. We worked side by side, me soldering drone cores, her disassembling old servos with deft fingers. She rarely spoke, but the silences between us no longer felt hollow. I learned the rhythm of her movements, the way her ears perked when she was curious, or twitched when she was trying to hide amusement. One afternoon, I caught her humming softly while she worked. It was a tune unlike any I'd heard. Strange, lilting, almost mournful. "Where'd you learn that?" I asked. She froze, claws pausing mid-screw. "I don't know. It's just always been in my head." I leaned back, studying her. "Then it's yours. A song that belongs to Lyra." Her lips parted in surprise, then curved into the faintest smile. She hummed again, louder this time, letting the melody fill the workshop. But Elisir wasn't going to let us keep our peace. It started with rocks thrown at the workshop door, clattering against the metal at night. Then came the shouts, drunken miners calling her names, daring her to come out and fight. I ignored them, but Lyra's ears always flattened, her tail curled tight as she pressed against the wall until the voices faded. One evening, I stepped outside to find 3 men waiting. Not drunk this time, stone sober, their eyes sharp with purpose. "You've been warned," the biggest said, his hand resting on a pipe slung across his shoulder. "We won't let that beast curse this town any longer. You have 1 day to send her away." I tightened my grip on the torch at my belt. "Or what?" The smallest of them spat into the dirt. "Or you'll both disappear." They left without another word, their threat heavy in the air. When I stepped back inside, Lyra was waiting, eyes wide, hands clenched. "They'll kill you," she whispered. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Not if we stay smart." But she shook her head, her whole body trembling. "You don't get it. This is how it always ends. They always come for me. And anyone near me gets hurt." Her words tore through me. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this time was different, but the truth was, I could see the storm building. Still, I reached for her. "We'll face it. Together." She stared at me, as if trying to believe. Then, with a shuddering breath, she leaned into me, her forehead pressing against my chest. The storm came sooner than I thought. 2 nights later, the workshop was set alight. I woke to the smell of smoke, the crackle of flames licking across the roof. Lyra bolted upright, her ears flat with panic. I grabbed her hand and dragged her through the haze, kicking open the back hatch as fire roared behind us. Outside, the canyon air was cool, but the glow of fire painted the night. Our home, the only safe place she'd known, was being eaten alive. Lyra clutched at me, eyes wide with horror. "They'll never stop," she gasped. "No matter where I go, they'll. Then we won't let them." I cut in, gripping her shoulders. "We leave Elisir. Tonight." She shook her head violently, tears streaking down her furred cheeks. "They'll hunt us. They always do." "Then let them hunt me too," I said, my voice hard. "Because I'm not letting you face it alone." She stared at me, trembling. And then, slowly, painfully, she nodded. We ran. Through canyon shadows, away from the settlement's glow, carrying nothing but what we could strap to our backs. Lyra kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting the mob to appear, but I kept us moving. Hours later, when the horizon began to glow with dawn, we collapsed beneath a jagged outcrop of stone. I spread my jacket over her shoulders, her tail curling around it instinctively. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy with exhaustion and smoke. But then, her voice broke through, soft and raw. "No one's ever stayed. Not once. They all leave. Or they die." I turned to her, brushing a strand of red fur from her cheek. "I'm not leaving." Her amber eyes met mine, glistening. Her hand rose, hesitant, and pressed against my chest as though testing if I was real. "You'll regret it," she whispered. I caught her hand, holding it firm. "No. I'll regret nothing." She broke then, not into fear, but into something else. Her body shook as tears spilled freely, and she leaned into me, burying her face against my neck. Her tail coiled around us both, pulling me closer, as if she could anchor herself in that moment. And as the sun rose over the canyon, painting her fur in firelight, I knew the truth. Whatever came next, I had already chosen her. And she, trembling and clinging to me with all the strength she had left, was beginning to choose me too. We didn't make it far before the chase began. By the second day, smoke no longer clung to us alone. The sound of engines echoed down the canyons. Dune bikes, fast and loud, their engines snarling like predators. Lyra's ears caught them before I did. She stiffened mid-step, her tail bristling, eyes snapping wide. "They've come," she whispered. I looked back. Dust plumes rose behind us, growing larger by the second. The miners weren't content with burning us out. They meant to finish what they'd started. "Run," I said, grabbing her hand. We sprinted through the rocky paths, lungs burning, shadows of canyon walls swallowing us. The bikes roared closer, their headlights bouncing off the stone. Voices carried over the wind, shouts, curses, threats. Lyra stumbled, gasping, but I caught her arm and pulled her up. "Just a little further," I urged. The path split ahead, one route broad and open, the other narrow and jagged. Without hesitation, I dragged us into the narrow cut. Rocks tore at my arms as we squeezed through, the bikes skidding behind us, too wide to follow. The riders cursed, their voices echoing against the stone. But I knew it wouldn't stop them. They'd circle around. By dusk, we found shelter in a cavern hollowed by centuries of wind. The air inside was cool, the silence heavy. Lyra collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving, for damp with sweat. Her amber eyes locked on me, burning with panic. "They'll keep coming. They won't stop." I knelt beside her, brushing ash and grit from her cheek. "Then neither will we. If we keep moving through the canyon trails, they'll wear themselves out before we do." Her ears twitched, disbelief flickering. "You think you can outlast an entire town?" "No," I admitted. "But I think I can keep you safe long enough for them to realize they can't break us." She stared at me, lips trembling. "Why? Why fight for me? You could walk away. Save yourself?" I held her gaze steady as stone. "Because I'd rather fight the whole world than abandon you." Her breath caught, and she pressed a trembling hand to her lips, as though my words had struck something too deep to face. For a long moment, we just sat in the cavern's silence, the sound of our ragged breaths filling the void. Then, slowly, she leaned against me, her tail curling around my waist, anchoring me to her. We didn't get long. The next morning, the canyon shook with explosives. Rocks crumbled as the miners blasted a section of wall, collapsing the narrow trails we'd used to escape. The boom echoed like thunder, and dust rained down into the cavern. Lyra's claws dug into my arm. "They're trapping us," she whispered. I swore under my breath, hauling her to her feet. "Then we fight our way out." Her eyes widened, horrified. "Fight? There are too many." I cut her off, pulling the plasma torch from my belt. The fuel gauge blinked low, but it would be enough. "We don't have to win. We just have to show them we won't bow." The first miner came charging into the cavern mouth, pipe raised. I stepped forward, torch blazing blue, and drove it into the ground between us. The sudden flare of heat and light forced him back, curses spilling from his lips. Behind him, more shadows gathered, 5, 10, maybe more. Their voices filled the canyon, hungry for blood. Lyra pressed against my back, trembling. But when I glanced at her, I saw the fire in her eyes. Fear, yes, but beneath it, something else. Something fierce. "I won't let them take you," she whispered. And I realized she wasn't just afraid for herself anymore. She was afraid for me. The mob surged forward. I tightened my grip on the torch, setting my stance. The cavern walls echoed with the roar of angry men. But beside me, Lyra stepped forward too, her tail lashing, her claws unsheathing with a sound like steel on stone. If they wanted a beast, they'd face one. And they'd face me beside her. The cavern mouth exploded into chaos. They came with pipes, knives, and mining tools sharpened into crude weapons. The first man lunged, and Lyra met him. She moved like the wind through stone, claws flashing in arcs of silver. He went down screaming, his pipe clattering into the dirt. I swung the plasma torch at another, its blue flame searing a streak across his arm. He recoiled, howling, and stumbled back into the others. "Stay behind me!" I shouted. But she didn't. Lyra tore into the mob with a ferocity born of survival. Her tail whipped, knocking a miner off balance. Her claws raked across another's chest, tearing through fabric and flesh. The cavern echoed with their shouts, fear mixing with rage. And yet, even as she fought, her eyes kept flicking to me. Not wild, not mindless, watching, guarding. The miners regrouped at the cavern mouth, muttering curses. One spat blood into the dirt. "You see?" he bellowed. "The beast is dangerous. Look what she did. She defended herself." I shot back, chest heaving, torch raised. "You came here to kill her." But reason meant nothing to men blinded by hate. They surged again, a tide of fury and fear. Lyra snarled, fur bristling, but her body trembled with exhaustion. She wasn't unstoppable. She was burning herself out. I stepped in front of her, torch flaring, forcing two men to hesitate. One slipped past, raising his blade toward her. I didn't think. I drove my shoulder into him, tackling him to the ground. The blade skittered away, clattering against stone. He tried to rise, but I slammed the torch's butt into his jaw, dropping him cold. Lyra stared at me, amber eyes wide. For a heartbeat I saw it, the realization that I wasn't just standing with her. I was bleeding, fighting, becoming hated with her. Her lips parted, trembling. But there was no time for words. More came. Too many. We fell back deeper into the cavern, my arms aching from the weight of the torch, her breath ragged. "They won't stop," she gasped. "They'll keep coming until they break us," I finished grimly. She nodded, eyes glistening. "Then let them try." The cavern walls narrowed into a choke point. I shoved broken rocks into place, forming a barricade. Lyra crouched beside me, her claws coated in blood and dust. We didn't need to say it. This would be where we made our stand. The mob's voices grew louder, echoing through the stone. Then came the leader, the foreman who'd warned me before. His coal-blackened hands gripped a shock baton, humming with energy. "You should have listened, boy," he growled. "Now you'll die with her." He charged. The baton swung in a crackling arc. I raised the torch, sparks flying as the two weapons clashed. The impact rattled my bones, but I held firm. Behind me, Lyra lunged, slashing at another miner who tried to flank us. The foreman shoved hard, forcing me back against the wall. His eyes burned with hate. "She's cursed. She'll destroy everything you touch." I gritted my teeth, pressing back with every ounce of strength. "No. She's the only thing worth saving here." For a moment, shock flickered across his face, just long enough. I twisted, driving the torch against his chest. His scream filled the cavern as the blue flame scorched through fabric. He collapsed, smoke rising from the wound. The mob faltered. Their leader was down, writhing in the dirt. Doubt rippled through them, breaking their fury's edge. Lyra stepped forward, bloodied but unbowed, her claws glinting. Her voice shook the cavern, raw and fierce. "You call me a beast? Look at yourselves. You're the monsters." Her words rang louder than the flames. For the first time, the miners hesitated, not because of claws or torchlight, but because they were forced to see themselves. They broke. One by one, mutters replaced shouts. Fear replaced rage. They dragged the wounded foreman away, retreating into the night. The cavern fell silent. Only our ragged breaths remained. Lyra sagged against the wall, trembling, blood streaked across her fur. I rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. "You're hurt," I murmured, panic rising. She shook her head weakly. "Not bad. You stayed." Her amber eyes locked on mine, shining with something new. Something fragile and burning all at once. "I told you I would," I whispered. Her hand rose, claws trembling as she touched my face. "You're not afraid of me, even now?" "Afraid?" I said, my voice breaking. "No. Proud." Her lips parted, a soft gasp escaping. Then, with a shuddering breath, she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to mine. The cavern was silent but for our breaths, our wounds, our hearts pounding in the aftermath. And in that silence, she whispered the truth I think she'd been holding back her whole life. "You've won my heart." The mob's retreat bought us a breath, but no more. Elisur was too small, too proud. They wouldn't let their defeat stand. I knew they'd come again, not as a drunken rabble this time, but organized, armed, and ready to end it. And when they did, it wouldn't just be the two of us fighting in a cavern. It would be a war for whether she was allowed to exist. We staggered through the night, leaving the cavern behind before they could regroup. Lyra leaned on me, her steps uneven, her fur matted with dust and blood. She refused to let me carry her, though her body shook with exhaustion. "Lyra," I murmured, "we need a plan." Her amber eyes burned in the dim light. "Plans don't matter. They'll never forgive me. Never forgive you either." "Then we'll make them stop coming," I said, jaw tight. She shook her head. "You don't know what they'll do. They'll bring weapons, numbers. You'll die because of me." I gripped her hand, forcing her to meet my eyes. "I'd die without you anyway." She froze, her breath catching, her tail flicking sharply behind her. The fight in her eyes wavered. Because she wanted to believe, but believing was dangerous. By dawn, we reached an abandoned ore refinery carved into the cliffs. Rusted machinery loomed over us, half-eaten by time. It was a ruin, but it was shelter. Inside I scavenged what I could, old power cells, heavy piping, scraps of wiring. I'd built tools out of worse. Lyra watched, silent at first, then joined in, hauling steel, sharpening shards of metal into makeshift blades. Every so often, our eyes met across the clutter, unspoken words passing between us. She wasn't just preparing to fight. She was preparing to fight with me. That night, as we worked by lantern light, she broke the silence. "I used to dream of this," she whispered. I looked up from the wiring. "Dream of what?" Her ears flicked uncertainly. "Of someone standing with me. Just once. Not because they were forced, not because they wanted something. Just because they chose me." I set the tools down, crossing the space between us. "And now?" Her tail curled around her legs, her eyes shimmering. "Now I don't know what to do with it. Part of me still waits for you to walk away." I reached out, brushing a strand of red fur from her cheek. "Then stop waiting. I'm not leaving." Her breath trembled, and she leaned into my touch, closing her eyes. For a moment, the world outside didn't exist, only her warmth, her fragility, her fierce heart. The miners came at dawn 2 days later. Engines growled outside the refinery, headlights cutting through the dust. Dozens of them this time, armed with rifles, batons, and mining explosives. At their head stood the foreman, his chest bound in charred bandages, his eyes burning with hate. "Come out!" he bellowed. His voice echoed through the canyon. "Hand over the beast, and we'll let you live. Refuse, and we burn you both where you stand." Lyra's hand tightened on my arm. Her claws pricked my sleeve, but I didn't flinch. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "They'll have to try," I said. We made our stand. The refinery roared to life with traps we prepared, makeshift charges set into rusted pipes, drones I'd pieced together buzzing to life with sparks of energy. The miners surged in, shouting, firing shots that pinged off metal beams. The first charge detonated, shaking the ground and scattering the front line. Lyra moved like fire through the smoke, her claws flashing, her tail striking with whip-like precision. I covered her with the torch and a stolen rifle, firing into the chaos. The refinery became a battlefield of shadows and steel. Sparks lit the air, screams echoed against rusted walls. We fought side by side, every movement in sync. But the miners kept coming. For every one we dropped, 2 more pushed forward. In the heart of the battle, the foreman came for us again. His bandages were stained, his face twisted with hate. He carried not a baton this time, but a mining saw, its teeth whirring with deadly hunger. "You'll regret ever siding with that abomination," he roared. He swung the saw, sparks spraying as it ripped across a steel beam. I dodged, dragging Lyra with me. The noise shook the refinery, drowning out even the screams of battle. Lyra snarled, leaping forward, her claws raking across his arm. Blood sprayed, but he didn't falter. He slammed the saw against the floor, sending shards of rock flying. I lunged, torch blazing, but he caught me with a brutal kick, sending me sprawling. The torch skittered away. "Human fool!" he spat, raising the saw. "You'll die for her!" The blade screamed down. But Lyra was faster. She threw herself between us, claws catching the saw, her body straining as sparks flew. Her amber eyes blazed, her voice raw with fury. "You will not touch him!" With a cry that tore from the depths of her soul, she twisted, ripping the saw from his grasp and hurling it aside. Her claws sank into his chest, driving him back. He gasped, choking, as her strength poured into the strike. Then he collapsed, lifeless, the bandages stained darker still. The mob froze. Their leader was gone. Their hate faltered. Some dropped their weapons, others turned and fled into the canyon. The refinery echoed with silence, broken only by the crackle of fires and our ragged breaths. Lyra stood trembling, blood on her claws, her chest heaving. She turned to me, eyes wide, not with triumph, but with fear. I killed him!" she whispered, voice breaking. I rose, catching her shaking hands in mine. "You saved us!" Her tears spilled freely now, streaking through the dust on her cheeks. "They'll never stop hating me. Even now, even after this." I pulled her into my arms, holding her against me as her tail coiled around us both. "Then let them hate. Let the whole galaxy curse your name. I'll still be here. Always." Her body shook with sobs, her claws clutching at me like I was the only solid thing in a crumbling world. And maybe I was. But as the dawn broke over the canyon, painting her fur in golden fire, I knew something had changed. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She wasn't just shunned or hunted. She was loved. And no mob, no town, no hate could take that from her now. The refinery lay silent in the days after, smoke drifting from twisted beams and shattered machines. The miners had scattered, too broken and leaderless to regroup, but the weight of what had happened lingered in every shadow. Lyra sat on the edge of a rusted platform, her legs drawn up, her tail wrapped around them. She stared at her claws as though they were foreign things, the memory of what she'd done still burning in her eyes. I came to her quietly, sitting at her side. The wind howled through broken girders above, carrying the scent of metal and dust. "They'll never forgive me," she whispered. "Maybe not," I admitted. "But forgiveness isn't what you need." She looked at me then, amber eyes shimmering. "Then what do I need?" I reached for her hand, holding it gently despite the sharpness of her claws. "A chance to live. To choose who you are, not who they say you are." Her lips parted, trembling. She looked down at our joined hands, then leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. For once, she didn't argue. We buried the foreman on the canyon ridge. Not for his sake, but because leaving him to rot would only poison what little peace remained. Lyra dug with silent determination, her claws tearing into the earth with grim finality. When it was done, we stood over the crude cairn of stones. Lyra's voice was low, raw. "He hated me. But he believed he was right." I nodded. Hate always thinks it's right. She closed her eyes, gripping the gear necklace at her throat. Then I'll prove him wrong. I'll live. Even if it means carrying the weight of what I've done. Her words struck me with quiet power. She wasn't running anymore. The settlement of Elisir never came for us again. Maybe they feared Lyra now, or maybe they simply chose to forget. The canyon swallowed rumors like sand, scattering them into echoes. But we didn't stay. The refinery couldn't be a home, and neither could Elisir. Together, we walked farther into the frontier, into the dust and starlight, leaving behind everything we'd known. It wasn't easy. We scavenged food where we could, bartered with wary traders who eyed Lyra with suspicion. Sometimes we faced silence, sometimes outright rejection. But each time, I stepped forward first, standing between their fear and her. And each time, her hand found mine, tighter than before. One night, beneath a sky wide with stars, Lyra curled beside me by the fire. Her fur glowed in the light, her eyes catching the constellations above. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Regret what?" "Choosing me. Leaving everything behind." I studied her face. The scars of fear slowly fading, the strength that had grown in their place. "No. I regret every moment it took me to find you. But not this. Never this." Her breath caught, and she buried her face against my chest. Her tail wrapped around me, holding me close as though afraid I'd vanish with the dawn. "You've given me more than anyone ever has," she whispered. "A name. A choice. A heart that isn't afraid of mine." I held her tighter, letting the fire crackle between us. "And you've given me something I never thought I'd have again." She lifted her head, curious. "What's that?" "Someone worth fighting for." Her smile bloomed, fragile but radiant, as if it had been waiting her entire life to be born. We kept moving, settlement to settlement, never settling too long. Sometimes we found kindness, more often suspicion, but there were moments, rare and precious, when people saw her not as a beast, but as Lyra. And each time, her smile grew a little steadier. One evening, a child in a trade post reached out to touch her tail. Lyra froze, expecting recoil or screams. But the child only laughed, innocent and fearless. The mother gasped, pulling the child back, but I saw something change in Lyra's eyes. Hope, cautious and trembling, like a flame struggling against wind. Later that night she whispered, "Maybe one day, they won't all hate me." I kissed her hand. "One day they'll know you like I do." Months passed. The frontier stretched wide, but no longer felt empty. Not with her beside me. There were nights of fear, yes. Nights we lay awake, listening for footsteps in the dark. But there were also nights of laughter, her laughter, low and uncertain at first, then freer as the walls around her heart crumbled. And with every dawn, I saw her grow, not into the beast they feared, but into the woman she had always been, hidden beneath their scorn. Years later, when people asked about us, stories had already begun to spread. Some called her a fox beast still, but others whispered of a woman who had fought a mob and lived, who carried scars yet walked proudly beside the man who refused to abandon her. Legends grow in strange ways on the frontier. And ours, it seemed, was becoming one of them. On a quiet night, watching the stars from a canyon ridge, Lyra curled against me and whispered words that silenced every doubt I'd ever carried. "They shunned me. Hated me. Tried to destroy me. But you chose me. And that choice is the only thing that's ever made me feel alive." Her amber eyes burned into mine, no longer with fear, but with fierce, unshakable love. And as the wind carried her words into the endless sky, I knew the truth would outlive us both. I had shown her kindness, and she had given me her heart. That was our victory. That was humanity. That was love. Reaching this point means you're a true fan of these tales. Comment below with your state or country. I'd love to see where our community is listening from.